Hi everyone. So after 2 years of enjoyable driving in the Ioniq 38kWh, the end of my lease arrived and I had to make a decision of what to do next. Would I extend the lease, because it was only a 2-year lease, because we were testing whether or not we could live with an electric car? Would we try and buy out the car, or would we look for something different? So we had to weigh up what was good about the Ioniq and what was bad about the Ioniq. So the range of the car was okay. We were able to live with it without having off-street parking and nowhere at home to charge. We were able to charge using the public network just fine. Occasionally we found it hard to find a time to charge the car up at a convenient time, leaving us a little low on range. So having a bigger range would be ideal. We found that charging the car at rapid chargers was a little slower than expected, especially in the cold weather. We found that it throttled the charge quite significantly when the weather was cold, and through research we found that it was more than you would expect with other electric cars that can charge at 50 kilowatts. This wasn't the case with the first generation Ioniq. It seemed to be more of a problem with the second generation Ioniq. So we had to decide whether or not we could live with these things if we bought the car. And we decided that actually we weren't happy to buy the car, mainly because we were looking to do longer European road trips in the future, and thinking that actually this could really be quite slow. We're going to the south of France this summer, and we thought, no, we're not happy with the speed that this car charges and the range of the car. So we needed a car that could fit the entire family. We've not got a big family, it's just the three of us, me, my wife and my daughter. My daughter's 7, and it needs to have a medium-sized boot. Ideally, I didn't really want to go for an SUV. We have another car which is a Qashqai, and we were lured into the idea of having an SUV, and now, to be honest, we've fallen out of love with the SUV's look. We don't really want to go for one if we could avoid it. We looked at Tesla Model 3, although the Model 3 would have been a push, but then the price went up twice in the time we were looking at it. For over 2 months it went up twice, and it just wasn't affordable. We just couldn't justify the cost, although I would have really liked to have gone for a Model 3. So without the Model 3 looking for, we looked at the ID3, we looked at the Zoe, far too small. We looked at the E208. I like the styling of the E208, but found that it was just a bit too small again. So anyway, what did we go for in the end? Well, let me show you. So in the end we went for this, the Hyundai Kona 64 kilowatt. And yes, we did say that we didn't want to go for a crossover, but to be honest, there isn't really much choice out there, to be honest. There is so many SUVs and not many standard hatchbacks. Really, it just came down to this Kona was the right price and the right range and the right sort of charging speed that we were looking at. So I do hope, with a combination of the range of this car and the charging speed, if we can charge at 100 kilowatt chargers, it should make our journey to the south of France in the summer much easier going. But we'll have to wait and see. And I will be bringing that journey to the channel at the end of the summer. We've had this for a few months now, so what do I like and what do I not like about the Kona? All the things I'm going to mention here are in comparison to the Ioniq 38 kilowatt, what I feel I've lost and what I think I've gained in comparison to the Ioniq. Firstly, I think that the interior of the Kona isn't quite as good as the Ioniq. I don't find it as quite as modern. And it's a little smaller. To be fair, the overall size of the car is smaller, but I do feel that this center console doesn't need to be this big. It feels like it makes this sort of driving position feel a little cramped in comparison. Not that I found myself knocking my knee against this center console or anything, but it doesn't really need to. I like the way that the Ioniq sort of curves round and it has this open space here in comparison to going all the way to the front. you've got an area underneath here, but you can't really use it. It's a bit sort of tucked out the way. We'll probably tuck a few things under here, maybe a bag of sweets or something, but it really is a bit of a wasted space. So in here you got your charger for your phone, tucks down there, and wireless charging is there. So you got your charging cable for Android Auto. But when you plug it in, your phone just sort of sits here. I'm recording on my phone, so I can't show you, but you always, when you've got your Android Auto on, I use it daily, you've basically got your cable here dangling and it's all open, and it doesn't feel very well planned out, because most people will use one of their phones connected and it kind of just sits here. It's okay if you're using your wireless charger, but it's always open for me, and I feel it just looks a bit messy. Also find that there's a lot of grey plastic here, and it kind of gives me vibes of like 90s CRT televisions. Now, when I first got the car, I wasn't sure about the buttons here. Actually, having buttons, proper buttons again, is fantastic. The amount of times that I went for a button in the Ioniq and I missed it because there's no sort of haptic feedback on those buttons, so just having the buttons work is just so much easier. So far you'll see that I'm getting an efficiency of 3.7 miles to the kilowatt, but it has been really quite cold up until the last week, and this car doesn't have the heat pump that the old Ioniq used to have. The heat pump was an optional extra at £800. I was going to consider getting that, but the wait time on the heat pump was a year to wait for a heat pump, and I just couldn't wait that long for the car, so we had to go without the heat pump. And you do notice that the efficiency is much less because of the heating, I think. I'll be interested to see how high I get it up to in the summer. I'm hoping that I might be able to, over a 12-month period, get that miles per kilowatt up to about 4 miles to the kilowatt. In comparison, over the 2 years I had the Ioniq, my miles per kilowatt was 4.6 miles to the kilowatt. Now, another negative in comparison to the Ioniq is the amount of space in the rear. Although, to be honest, except for my daughter, I've not had an adult passenger in the rear of this car since we've got it, and that's probably the way it's going to be, until my daughter grows up. The likelihood is that the rear legroom isn't going to be a problem in this car. We're not going to have that many people in the back of here. One of the untested worries is the smaller boot in comparison to the Ioniq. It's not the width of the boot that's smaller, really. It's actually a higher boot in comparison to the Ioniq. It's the depth that's shallower. You can't get a full-size case lengthways in this boot, where we used to get 2 large cases side by side and full length. It will be hanging over the boot here and it will not close, so you have to have one going this way. So come the summer, we're going to have to use some of the interior space for our long journeys, so only time will tell whether or not this boot is going to cause us a problem. But so far, absolutely no problem. It's perfectly fine for the shopping. It has got an area under here, and this all can come out for extra space. This all comes out, you see. You can have an aftermarket frunk plastic box added into the front of under the bonnet, which I am going to look at, seeing whether or not that's a possibility for the summer trip, so that you can get rid of all of the charging cables that usually fit under and under here, to free up as much space as possible for that long trip in the summer. But I am concerned where the front conversion sits on top of the inverter. I am worried about how hot it gets, so I'm going to have to research that quite carefully before I go installing that. So I am wary that I've said quite a few negative things here, but to be honest, I'm really picking at things. Day to day, I've really enjoyed having this car, and the bonuses are it's got so much more extra range, it's got faster performance, it's about 2 seconds quicker 0 to 60, and you really do notice that it's quite enjoyable to drive. And you do notice those things day to day. With having no charging at home, the extra range has been really impressive. It's made our life much easier having that extra 100 miles range in comparison to the Ioniq. And although it has got that SUV look, in comparison to the Qashqai, it drives so much better. It doesn't wallow around as much in the corners, and the Qashqai is a very sluggish car in a petrol form. This, with it being electric, obviously, is much more entertaining to drive. So yeah, so that's my first couple of months impressions of having the new car. I'll let you know how I get on in the future. If there are any problems, I will bring it to the channel, and I'll definitely be documenting my trip to the south of France this summer, and I will be bringing it to the channel, and I do hope that you will come back to see that. Thanks a lot for watching. Cheers.